Welcome to Russell's Emporium, and this is a tutorial about how to make one of our reticule kits. This is the kit. In the kit you will get a pack with your outer fabric, your lining fabric, you will get some kind of drawstring, and you will get pins and a needle. Added to this, you will need cotton, paper scissors, fabric cutting scissors, and something like a hair grip or one of these needle threaders, one of these threaders for your cord. In the pack you will have a pattern, and you will have some written instructions there. A few little pictures on the back just to help you on your way, but that's what I'm here for now, is to show you how. So first of all, we cut out the pattern. Just really quickly, doesn't have to be absolutely exact. This is only a guide really, but very quickly cut that out with your paper scissors. So we have one pattern. I'll put that to one side. We'll put the box to one side as well. Your fabric, I suggest that you iron it first. I mean, because it's been in the post to you, and it may well have a few little creases in. So we have the outer fabric and the lining. So if you could give that a quick iron over, just to iron over any of those lumps and bumps, because it all makes to a better finished product. So there's there, and of course your lining as well. There we are. So just a quick iron over, just so that gives that a bit better before you start cutting. With your pattern, you need to cut it. So as you say, there's plenty of fabric there, so wherever you would like to position your pattern is fine. If you're very clever, you can just cut out quite easily. If you're not so clever at your cutting, that obviously you could put a couple of pins in to secure your pattern. Okay, so just a quick cut round, and these are my fabric scissors. These are. Don't ever use your paper. Don't ever use your paper scissors for cutting fabric, because they're not so good. And the other way around, never use your sharp scissors for cutting paper, because you'll make them very, very blunt. So a quick cut round. Okay, so here's one I've made earlier. So we have now got an outer, and we have the inner. And that's our pattern pieces. So you see, two outers and two inners there. You've got two outers and two inners. So what we need to do is place our inner on top of one of the outers, yeah? And then we just pin those into place. Can you see that is the outer pattern uppermost? You see that is the back of that. So the outer pattern first, and then your lining on top. Outer fabric and lining on top. Yes? Lovely. So here we are. Since I'm making quite a few of them today, I've got a few ready already. So there we go. Again, outer and inner. And I like to just pop a couple of pins in just so that helps with everything. This is my sewing machine, but obviously you could use hand stitching. It will just take you a little bit longer really. What we're going to do is sew this seam here. And I just use a 1/4 inch, which is what my sewing machine quite easily does. But you just decide yourself what your seam allowance is. So we pop that on to the fabric. And then we're just going to sew along. Straight across. There we are, so right to the end. And then we can have that ready. We can take the pins out. And then that's one's seam. As you can see, there is the seam there. Let's do the next one. So seam allowance exactly the same on both sides, otherwise it will be uneven. There we are, straight across, and then pins out. And that's how it should be. You see, we have two pieces identically the same. What I like to do at this point is I like to give them another little press, because I find that sort of really helpful. And what I do is press these seams out. Obviously some experienced sewers might not think that important, but I like a crisp edge. I open the seam up, press it down like that, and then iron it down. There we go. That just helps. Right then. So the next thing that we are doing is we are putting both pieces together next. So we have got upper there, and the right side again on top. Right sides together. Can we see that? Right sides together, and we line them up. What I like to do is line this up as accurately as we can at this point here. Okay, and what I do is I pop a pin into that point there, so we can see that it would be absolutely matched up perfectly just there. Turn it round, and we need to match up this seam again. Can you see really closely? There we are. We have that seam matched up before we pop it down. Pop a pin in to keep that from moving around. Lovely. So next we have the tassels that are in your pack. Here, on this particular pack we have 3 tassels, and they want to go into the outer here. And I pop those on the corners, on these little corners. So first of all, I lay them in where they're going to go. I like to leave maybe a finger's width just there away, because that's where your seam allowance is going to be, and that tends to work really well when you're sewing round. There we are, a little finger width there. Then we pop the top over into that position. And then we just need to pin those to make sure that they don't move. Now, there's all various ways you could pin this. You'll have to be careful if you're going to sew over the pins. But I tend to take my pins out as I go along. That's how I tend to do them, like that. I mean, we all have our own little way of doing things, don't we? But that's mine. I like to get them into position as best we can and take the pins out as I go on. Lovely. So we have three tassels in position. We'll need a little space here for where the drawstring is going to go here. And you can see that on your pattern. What we have done is give you a little guide there. So if you was to pop that on the seam, where your seam is, it doesn't have to be this big, but this helps a nice big channel for you to get in your cord through. So you find a little point on there where you want to sew up to, and I pop a little pin there just so that I know where I'm going to sew up to. And again on the other side, I will just position it there and pop a little pin in where that little line is, and hopefully that will be helpful for you. And we see if we do it like that. Lovely, just a little pin so that we can see where to sew up. We're going to sew down here, we're going to sew down here, we're going to go sew down here, and then back up to here. So the sewing line is from this pin down, maybe a couple of over stitches here, down, a few over stitches here, maybe down here, a few over stitches just to anchor these lovely tassels, and back up to this pin here. That's our first sewing line. Okay, let's give that a go then. Pop it on our sewing machine, allowing for your seam allowance. So whatever you decide your seam allowance is, that needs to be the whole way round, the whole bag at the same seam allowance. So that is, I put needle in, that is my starting position. I generally take the pins out as I go along. Are you ready? So we're going to sew down this seam. When I get to the corner, I take the pin out, go so into the corner, and like I said, I like to go a little bit back and forth on that little bit there. Okay, a little bit of back, a little bit of back and forth, just to secure. Make sure these, and sometimes what I do with these, it's very long, these very long tassels, is you just turn it over as well, just because we need to make them secure, we don't want them falling out. So I keep going, so bearing in mind the seam allowance the whole way through. Now that's your point there. So you might want to just go backwards and forward a few times, backwards and forwards, backwards, just to make sure it's nicely secured. So I'm going to pop that under as well. I like mine really well secured. I don't want them falling off. Okay, you're not going to see this sewing, so you know it's not. Don't worry about it. Are you ready? And then on this side. To this point here, backwards and forwards a little bit. If you're hand sewing, of course, you can secure them really well. This one, we go around the seam until we get to our pin, and then when we get to that pin, I'm just going to finish that off. Lovely. Okay, so that one is the main thing done there. I think I've got a little thing trapped, a little cord. Then let's just take that long, that bit. There we are. So we have pins here. We have sewn from here down, round, round again, and up to that one there. So that is the main of the bag finished. The next we're going to do is we're going to sew this part of the bag. I'm lucky that this is all a similar colour. I don't need to change my cottons at this point. On this one, we are going to sew from just above this pin, so just above this pin, and then all the way down, across, maybe up to here. And again, you can put a little pin where you think I'm going to stop. There. And then we're going to start again here. And we are going to go from here, just making this little gap. for turning the bag inside out. So from here, so down, across, and to this pin. And then start again at this pin, across and down, and making sure that we are just going over onto this fabric here, just to the other end. There is a little thing on your pattern saying this is the little bit that we need to keep open so that we can turn the bag inside out. Right, let's give that a go. So, same seam allowance again, and I am starting, as you see, just a little bit above this pin here. I'm taking pins out as I go along. I'm going to do the same seam allowance all the way down there. And then I usually pop needle in for turning the corner. All the way down the seam here. And turn needle in and to turn my corner. And then we're going to go up to that pin. At that little pin, I do like to do a little back stitch just to give it a little bit more security then. Okay, so we see we've gone from above this join here, above and down and across to here. Then we're starting at this pin here. I shall take the pin out. As I say, you know, you need just enough room so that you can turn it inside out, so you can get your hand inside to turn it inside out. So remember, on here we are going just above this join here. You see, just above to secure it. And I'm going to do a little tiny back stitch just to make it extra secure. If you want a little bit extra security, what I do on some of these fabrics that do maybe fray a little bit, what I do is change my stitch to a zigzag stitch, and what I sometimes will do is just zigzag those bottom bits, really, where I think it might fray a little bit, and that gives it that extra strength. You don't have to do that, that's just an extra step if you want. So a little bit of that. You don't have to do it, but if you want to give that bag that little bit extra strength, I don't go all the way down. Okay, but you'll probably see that I've just zigzagged the edge a little bit just to give the added security to the tassels and stop it from fraying. That's part of the bag done then, really, now. If there is any little bits of cotton at this point, I tend to just trim them off. A little bit of trimming, just little bits, you know, that might have gotten in the way of a little bit of fraying. So now at this point, we need to turn the bag the right way around, just for the finishing off. So we've got this little gap here. You see this little gap here? And this is where we turn it through. So this weighing gap needs to be big enough so that we can get the whole of that through. So I tend to put my fingers through and get to the point where we've got the point of the bag here. And you see this point here. I tend to try and aim for there. And from there, we need to turn the bag out. And you can pull the back of the tassels, a little pull. But yeah, the corners of this bag, what makes it look so pretty, really. So we're turning the whole bag round. Pop out your corners, pop out all your corners there. So that's how it should look now, with your tassels pulled out straight. Lovely, like that. So the next bit is we're going to be sewing this top little bit. So what I tend to do is go from the side where these drawstrings are going to come from. And I've been doing these bags quite a long time really. So what I do is pop my finger through and make sure that that seam is laying really flat, really flat. So you can see right through. And I pop a pin in both sides. I'll do it on the other side as well. This is where the side seam where it pops out, and what I want it to lay flat so that it looks real professional when you're finished. So there is you could iron this if you wanted at this point. So I've been doing them quite a long time, so I don't need to iron them. I'm quite good at just popping my finger down that seam to make sure it lays flat. This point, this seam, we want to lay this flat as much as possible. So press that, just finger press that seam out. And what we're trying to do is make this seam as neat as possible. So if we just pinch it, can you see, just pinch there so that the lining is going to be inside. Just pinch it, and at that point what I tend to do is just rejiggle those pins. Let's try the other side so you can see. So from the inside you'll see that that seam needs to be flat for a professional finish. Just as I say, I just press it a little bit with my fingers just to make sure that that seam is nice and flat before you start. And then you turn in, you just pinch in there, so you've got a nice flat seam there. On here I just reposition the pins so that we're taking all the fabric in. You can see that's where I've put the pins, there and there. Took all this fabric inside. You see, we're getting the bag now. Look, it's looking quite good now. Look, we're getting a little bag. So at this point we could iron this to make sure it's flat, or we can just pin into position just to keep that nice and flat. But the idea is that you're not going to be able to see the lining. The lining is inside. You see, depending on what fabric you choose, really. This is nice, lovely cotton, so it actually folds very well, and it needs very little ironing. So that's the idea. You've got the outer fabric, and we really don't want to see the lining, so that's sort of tucked inside. If you're worried about it at this point, you could give that a little iron just to make sure you've got it lovely and flat. I tend to just use my fingers to make sure that I'm happy with it. My machine has one of these boxes that comes off to make this a lot easier for sewing around bags, depending on what sewing machine you've got. So we're opening up, and then we're popping over here like you would a sleeve, and then we have to start. We'll start on here, and I use my presser foot to see what I'm going to do about my seam allowance on here. I tend to use the inner measurement for this. So this is a straight stitch on this machine, and then what we are doing is we're just going to sew around just to keep this lining nice and flat. And you can take your time over this, you know, till you're entirely happy. When we get to this point here where these side seams are, I just tend to go forward and back a couple of times, because that does give your bag strength. You know, if you want it to be hard wearing and last a few years, you know, that really helps. Just a little forward and back, just over those side seams. You don't have to do that, obviously, but I found by making them that really just give them a little bit of extra strength. So that is one. We've been now all the way round. We have gone all the way round here. At this point, I generally take the pins out, because I really don't need them anymore, because it's all laying nice and flat. You know, when you first start making these bags, you might want to leave these end ones in here on the sides, just to give you a little bit more help when you're sewing round. So we've done one row of stitches. Now we need another row of stitches, because that's making your channel for your drawstring. So decide what your seam allowance is going to be, what you want it to be. I'm tempted to use this marker on my sewing machine, because that's a really helpful measurement there for me on my machine. But yes, decide where is the best for you. Let's like this, take the pins out. I don't want to break your needle on your sewing machine. And then I'm just going to sew over. I'll say I tend to just go a couple of forward and backwards over that side seam, just for extra strength. And we're going round. Make sure it's all even, all even on level. Again, a couple of little extra stitches just over that seam there. I mean, you can take your time over this, obviously, to make sure it's really nice and neat. Lovely. So as you can see, we've got two layers of stitches there, and then this is where we're popping the drawstring, just in here. Yeah. Obviously we need to cut off these little bits of cotton to make it look nice and tidy. We've got them all, I think we've got them all. And then the next thing we're doing is we need to sew. I tend to hand sew this to need it, but yeah, I mean, you could do it on the sewing machine. We make sure you put your points out. This is the lining, and then what we do is just pop them in together. So you just tuck the edges in, so it lines up nicely. Pop a pin or two pins in there. And then with a needle and cotton, I tend to just pop it do myself. But we could just sew with the sewing machine, just sew along that line if you want. You're not going to see it, it's going to be inside. But you know, we want a neat product. So I'll just pop that inside, make sure it's all nice and neat, everything's tucked in there. There we are, just a little neat, just a little neat stitch. Okay, you can take your time over this, but it's just a matter of closing that little hole where you've turned that bag out. Of course, we're nearly finished now, aren't we? So the only thing we need to do now really is give it a nice little press with our iron and pop a drawstring in. So we're just about there. So hopefully this has been a good tutorial for you. Hopefully it gives you some idea of how to do your bag. So that's lovely. Okay, so as I say, you can take your time just to make sure it's finished off lovely. That's my nails there. Okay, so there we are. Pop that back inside. Pop that back inside now. Make sure the corners are, and into the corners like that, into the corners nicely. Put them in, put all those corners into place. Really lovely. If you've got time, just it would be perhaps a good idea just at this point to give it a lovely crisp iron, you know, just to finish it off, make them points lovely. Okay, pull them a little bit and give them a little iron there. There we go. Just there we go. Okay, little iron just to make it nice and crisp there. And of course in your kit you've got your drawstring, and we just need to quite easily just divide that into two really. Divide that into two, give it a cut, and then pop your drawstring through. So start at one end, go through, go all the way through, all the way through. Yeah. What I like to do with these, because they do fray a little bit if you've got cord, I like to pop a little knot on each end so they don't fray too much. Pop a little knot on each, and then I take both together like that and make a nice big knot. But you could finish your bag however you wanted. You could even put little beads on there if you wanted. So that's one side done, and then the other side we start at the other side, and we thread that through from this side all the way around, there. You can see that's, and it comes out the other end there, hopefully there. There we are, coming out at that end. And you see, so we've got one lot coming out on this side, one light coming out on this side, and so what I tend to do is pop a little knot on each end, just so they don't fray too much. Pop them together and then do another little knot there. If you want to put beads on, we have done some with beads on there, that's quite nice. And you can see, so we're threading through and through, knotting, through and through and knotting, and then you're ready. All done. Hope you enjoy making your little reticule, and I hope you enjoy going to many balls and picnics and showing it off, especially if it's made by you. Take care, and visit Russell's Emporium again sometime. Thanks very much. Bye bye.